So let's talk about the process. An individual or relative suspects that abuse is taking place. You've got an elder in the protected category or in the special category who is not fully competent. And furthermore, if I recall my law school days, clearly the person who has suffered from the crime is the one who would pursue criminal action.
You're 100% right, and that's especially true for financial crimes, because not necessarily dealing with their incompetence, but people have a right to be foolish with their money. I mean, for the most part, to put it bluntly, I have the right to give all my money to the flat earth society if I wanted to.
Okay.
And that may upset my children, and my children might think there's abuse going on there.
Mm-hmm.
The number one question I get at all the senior fairs that we go to around the island is adult children coming to me saying, Scott, how can I prevent my parents from giving away all their money?
Sure.
And they're giving it to their neighbors, they're giving it to their church, they're giving it to the homeless adult child who obviously has a drug problem. They're giving it to the lottery sweepstakes people. And they're giving it away like that. So you have to realize, even though there's a crime going on, because they're never going to win the lottery sweepstakes. I'm sorry, it's been proven time and time again, those are frauds. Here in Hawaii, you get a letter, a phone call, an email saying you won the lottery. It's a lie. They just want your money. I'm just putting that out there right there. But it is a crime, but the victim of those crimes doesn't want to prosecute. Because in their own mind, they might think that they're going to get the millions of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what you have to show, one of the elements of a crime is that the criminal did something without the permission. And if, in order to prove without the permission, you need the victim to say, they took it from me without my permission. But unfortunately with elder abuse, they give the permission. They give away the money. And a lot of victims of crimes do not want to prosecute.
Yeah.
We've had children steal from their parents hundreds of thousands of dollars through deceit, through ID theft, through all these things. The police say, okay, we're investigating this because, let's say the adult sibling will call the police. The first question out of the mouths of the police is to the parent, do you want to prosecute? Do you want to prosecute your son for stealing this money? 9 times out of 10, okay, maybe 8 times out of 10, they will say no.
Okay, let's stop right there because that then brings up the question of police training.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Oh, okay, yeah. We can, how much time do we have? How many?
Let's talk about that element of it because they're key players in this.
You're 100% right. They are key players, and you've spoken before off camera about Lieutenant John McCarthy. He's the head of the Honolulu Police Department's Financial Crime Unit. He's been there for 39 years. And so I'm 39 years. He's an expert. He's the rock star when it comes to financial crime investigation here on Oahu.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll admit that HPD needs training as well. Repeatedly, I have people telling me they called the police about a crime, and the beat officer who just got out of the academy 6 months prior says, oh, I see a lot of paperwork. This sounds like a civil case. Maybe you can sue the person there. We are trying to educate all ranks within the police department that no, it is a criminal case. And they'll say like, well, but they shared a joint account, so how can it be criminal? No, it's still a crime to steal money. They might say, oh, but they were given the access to the checkbook. It's still a crime to take money without permission. Probably the number one scenario I face is that people call me all the time. And they'll tell me the scenario where they try to contact the police, and then the police said, no, we're not going to take the report, sue them like that. Here, I give them advice on how to get their case within the system. I'll say, listen, call the police. But before you call the police, you need to do a couple things. write out your statement first. You can write it in a letter form, you can put it on, you can write it on a napkin or whatever like that, just write it out. Because imagine you calling the police, they shove a blank piece of paper in front of you and say, okay, tell me what happened.
Yeah.
And they're standing over your shoulder and you feel nervous and you like write something illegible and not the entire story like that. So I recommend that people calling the police, first, before you make that call to the police, write out your statement. That's very helpful. If you have any sort of proof, like any sort of receipts or bank records or just anything like that, have it available as well. Now call the police. How do you call the police? 911, okay? Now when you call 911, they're going to ask you 3 questions. Fire, police, or ambulance. You're going to say police. Now, they're going to say emergency, non-emergency. Just say non-emergency if it's a financial crime, okay? Because a lot of people think they don't want to call the police because they don't want to inconvenience them. They say, well, if I call the police about this theft, they might interrupt their investigation about a murderer and then that criminal will go away. No, just say non-emergency. Now, they'll come to your house, you say a couple things. You say, I want to report a felony theft case. Maybe it's felony theft or deception or like that. And I want a police report number. That's key.
Wow.
Because then what people say, then I'll have people call me back with the police report number. And when a beat officer says, this person wants a police report number, I better just make a report then because they're going to be calling somebody later on about the number. So it's going to be my blood on the line. Mm-hmm. With that number, I can give my friend, John McCarthy, a call and say, hey, John, this looks like a good case here. And then it'll skip multiple levels within the police department to get into the right eyes. Because you have to remember, when you make a call to a beat officer, it has to go through his sergeant, then it has to go through his lieutenant, then it has to be shifted over to the detective unit, the criminal investigation division like that. Then it has to be assigned to the financial crimes unit. There's certain ways you can get it from beat officer to financial crimes unit, and cut out all that time wasted to go through all those different steps there.
How important is time?
How important is money? I mean, we have had cases where it goes back to changing the law. It goes back to, if you allow me to give you an example here.
Please.
For a couple of years, we tried to change the law to where the banks were mandated to report the crime. And so they were reporting it to Adult Protective Services. Okay. Now, we wanted that law changed to instead of calling Adult Protective Services, call the police immediately. Telling the banks, call the police immediately. Why? Because Adult Protective Services, they're not trained or nor have the resources to investigate the cases instantly.
Okay.
Okay. And oftentimes they'll get a call from the bank, and then they'll do a brief investigation and say, oh, this person's not vulnerable, or this person's not dependent, so it's not within our jurisdiction. Call the police. Now that call might happen a week or 2 later.
Or not at all.
Or not at all. And so in the meantime, if the bank doesn't freeze the assets, which oftentimes they don't, then the criminal is still taking out money during this course here. Now, we tried to change the law. It took us 2 times at the ledge to change it. What was the holdup? We don't know, okay? The banks were in favor of the law change. Adult Protective Services was in favor of the law change because they didn't want all these calls coming from the bank anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So they're telling the legislators, we don't want it, give it to the police. The police were there saying, we want it, give it to us. The bank was saying, we don't care, just tell us who to call, okay? I testified saying, it's a good idea. The ledge said, oh, let's think about it. We'll hold it over till next year. And then the same thing happened the following year. And then say, oh, how about we'll just make it both? We'll make them, and it's like, oh my gosh. Because then the banks now have to make 2 reports there.
Yeah.
And APS is still getting all these reports that they didn't want. And so, anyway, I guess they say you don't want to see how the sausage is made. And
If the assets are not frozen, then you can continue and accelerate the fact,
right.
okay, that you know that something's happened, there's been a complaint, one of the relatives is filing a complaint or whatever, and they can just keep and accelerate the withdrawals, from those assets. Or get a plane and take off on the island, and then you got a jurisdiction problem.
Right, exactly. And you bring up a good point about the training of HPD. Also, we're doing training with financial institutions as well.
Oh, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
we're going to the banks, and those are the more difficult training because they have to get up really, really early.
You mean it's not 9 to 5, or 9 to 3, or
We
whatever it
have
is?
to, we have to like do these trainings to the bank people before the bank opens up there. I'm not a morning person. But it's very helpful though. Just again, remind tellers, because their job's huge. I mean, tellers are dealing with thousands of dollars. They're like, and I'm constantly amazed at what tellers do remember. Because they might be interviewed by HPD like days later, and they'll say, I remember that transaction. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's amazing that tellers have such good memories like that. But sometimes they do need to be reminded about some of the warning signs of abuse.
Yeah.
Some of the unusual situations, be reminded that, hey, abuse is happening here in Hawaii. And so you need to be cognizant of what's going on here.